Welcome to the Wife Stories YouTube channel. New video every day, and don't forget to subscribe. Here we go.
I shut the door behind me and stayed right where I was, my back against the wood, breath coming in short, jagged bursts. I don't remember ever feeling my heart pound so violently, like it wanted out of my chest. Outside, the parking lot was dark, the lights from the nearby street lamps flickering and making the asphalt shine with an oily gleam. I'd come here to pick up my wife, Laura, from her weekly yoga session. She'd said, "We finish around 8. Come by 9. I'd come early, with flowers, no less, to surprise her. And I'd waited in my car for well over an hour, face burning with the suspicion that something was wrong. No one came out. Not Laura. Not any of the other women I'd half expected to see. Finally, I got out, closed my car door, walked into the building, and asked the security guard if the yoga class was running late. She stared at me a little confused, then said, "They finished hours ago. Actually, ma'am never showed today." My temples throbbed. There was this dryness in my mouth, as though I'd swallowed a handful of dust. I thanked the guard, or maybe I just turned around without a word, and found myself out here, leaning on the exit door, telling myself to calm down. But I couldn't calm down, because the longer I stood there, the more this thick, bitter sense of dread crawled up my spine. Something was definitely going on. I tossed the flowers into a dumpster on my way back to the car. They'd begun to wilt anyway. Ridiculous to carry them home like some clueless fool. My hands trembled as I opened the driver's side door and slid behind the wheel. The engine purred, but I barely heard it over the pounding of blood in my ears. I felt a wave of anger, raw and sharp, churning in my stomach. My mind refused to believe that she would lie so blatantly. We'd been married 7 years. We have a 5-year-old son. I needed answers, but first, I needed to get home. When I arrived, the house was quiet except for the muffled sounds of cartoons drifting from the living room. My son, I'll just call him Little J, was sprawled on the couch, laughing at some silly show, pillows scattered around the floor. No sign of Laura. I asked him, "Where's Mom?" He shrugged and pointed upstairs, though he said he wasn't sure if she was still there. He'd heard her come in, then leave again. I felt my gut tighten. Maybe she just ran out to the store. But I knew that was a lie I was telling myself, so I wouldn't have to face the obvious. I sat on the couch next to my son, tried to slow my breathing. After a while, I took him to his room to tuck him in. That's when he looked at me with those big, honest eyes children have and said, "Mommy was playing massage with that man again." I stared at him, a cold numbness spreading through my arms. "What do you mean, buddy?" He demonstrated. He lay down on the floor, patted his back, wiggled around as if he were trying to mimic the positions. She was like this, and he got on top. But I was quiet, like you taught me, Daddy. For a second, everything in my head just went silent, like all the noise was sucked out of the universe. No air, no movement. Then the rush came. My heart galloped. A wave of hot rage flared behind my eyes. I almost forgot to breathe. My son was watching me, innocent, no idea that his words had just hammered a stake into my chest. Okay, I managed at last, forcing what must have looked like the fakest smile in history. "Thank you for telling me. Let's keep that to ourselves for now." "All right. It's late. Let's get you to bed." "Okay, Daddy," he said softly. I got him under the covers, told him a quick story, and kissed him goodnight. In the hallway, I just stood there, staring into the shadows. My fists clenched and unclenched. Massage game. What the hell? I marched into the master bedroom, searching for some sign, some leftover clue, to confirm or deny my worst fear. Sheets were a little rumpled. A faint aroma of lavender and something else, maybe cologne. Could have been ordinary, except it felt like everything in that room was a betrayal of sorts, an echo of what I wasn't there to see. I tried to call Laura's phone. Voicemail. Over and over. I paced the living room until nearly midnight, half expecting her to burst through the door with some flimsy excuse, but she never came. By 1 in the morning, I sat on the couch, hands in my hair, resentment roiling in my gut like poison. Then, around 2, I heard the door. She came in quietly, keys jangling. She slipped into the bedroom without a word. I waited, fists tight, hoping she'd come out, see the living room light on, say something. She never did. I didn't follow her either. For 2 weeks, I wore a mask. I didn't yell, didn't confront her. I swallowed the acid in my throat, pretended to be the same mild, routine-oriented husband. But inside, I was unraveling. Every time I glimpsed her phone lighting up with a text, every time I noticed she stepped outside to take a call, I felt my teeth clench so hard my jaw ached. My boy's words haunted me, dancing in my head at 3 in the morning. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, some nightmare of being pinned under a wave I couldn't escape. I told myself, I need proof. I can't just accuse her and hope she crumbles. That's not how it works. And I needed to be absolutely certain. So I scrolled through her social media, her bank statements, the ones she forgot she'd given me access to for tax purposes. She had a small business, a clothing brand. She used an account for business expenses, a separate one for personal stuff. I started noticing weird charges, hotels, day spa services I'd never heard her mention, dinners at places an hour away in some obscure part of town, random deposits and withdrawals that made no sense. I followed her once, after she said she was meeting a supplier. She ended up in a private fitness studio by the beach. Parked near the entrance, I saw through the glass doors a tall, well-built man with a confident stance and a big, toothy grin. He had his hands on her shoulders. She leaned into him. They disappeared inside. The blinds dropped. My head pounded, my breath short. I wanted to charge in there, break something, scream. But I forced myself to stay in the car, biding my time. That night, she came home later than usual, gave me a quick nod, and went to shower. I stared at the bathroom door, listening to the water run, imagining her with the smell of him still on her skin. The thought alone made my vision blur with fury, and yet I said nothing, not that night. Not the next morning. I was waiting, building a plan. See, in those days of quiet torment, something in me broke, and reformed into something colder. I realized I wasn't going to confront her with tears or pleas. I wasn't going to break plates and slam doors. That's not me. But I'd find a way to make her lies cost her everything. Because after all, I wasn't just a husband. I was a father, a professional, a man who'd built up a life of stability. I'd be damned if I let her rip that life apart for some cheap fling with a personal trainer. The question that pounded in my head day and night was, why? Why'd she do it? We had a good home, a nice car, a decent income. We traveled occasionally. We had arguments like any couple, but never violence, never anything truly irreparable. So what is fidelity then? Is it just some fragile vow that breaks at the first strong gust of temptation? I once had a conversation about this with my best friend Eddie. I'd told him I believed real loyalty is the choice we make every day, no matter how tough life gets or how mundane it feels. He said, so it's an active decision to keep loving. Exactly. I told him. Temptation is always out there. But if we let ourselves be guided by every impulse, what's the point of committing to anyone? Now, standing in the wreckage of my illusions, I wondered if I'd been naive all along. Because apparently, not everyone sees fidelity as a daily choice. Some see it as a fence that's too easy to slip through if you find a big enough gap. Then, about a week after the yoga incident, I came home from work early. I told Laura I had a big meeting. Actually, it was canceled. When I stepped into the living room, everything was still. Quiet, warm light filtering through the blinds. I heard low voices upstairs. My body froze. Her voice hushed, saying, "Sha." I think I heard something. A man's voice. "Relax, he won't be back yet." I stood there a long moment, heart pounding like a war drum. My mind raced. Should I storm up there? Should I tear that bastard apart? But an odd calmness spread through me, a chilling clarity. I set my briefcase down silently. I took off my shoes. My breath was ragged, but I forced it slower. Then I climbed the stairs one step at a time, the blood roaring in my ears. The bedroom door was open just a crack. I saw them, her blouse half undone, him leaning over her, his hand on her waist. My mind registered every detail in seconds, his toned arms, the flex of his back, the intimacy of their posture. She was breathing heavily, eyes half closed, flush on her cheeks. My entire body shook, and for a heartbeat, I thought I might collapse or pass out from the surge of fury. The air felt so thick I could barely inhale. I should have burst in. Or maybe I shouldn't have, but in that moment, I did nothing. I just watched. Not for long. God knows, a few seconds can feel like a century. There was something disturbingly mesmerizing about witnessing the life you knew turning to ash before your eyes. Then I backed away, heart hammering a million beats a second. I was furious, but more than that, I was numb, like part of me died right then. I half stumbled down the stairs and out the front door, letting it swing shut behind me. I didn't slam it. I just closed it softly, like I might break something if I used any real force. My breath came in bursts again as I reached the sidewalk. My vision blurred. For a second, I thought I might throw up, but I didn't. Instead, I just stood there, staring at the house where I'd built memories with her. The home we'd made for our child, now turned into a stage for betrayal. I got in my car and drove. No destination in mind, just away. I ended up at a small bar near the freeway, ordered a whiskey neat, and stared at it for a good 10 minutes before I took a sip. The burn felt good. A reminder that I was still alive, still had a pulse. I forced myself not to break down, not to cry. Men don't cry, right? We bury it, or we turn it into rage, or we lock it away, let it burn from the inside. When I finally returned home that night, she was in the living room, acting like she'd just come back from an errand. I suppose the guy had left well before. She gave me a small, guarded smile. "Hey, honey. How was work?" I stared at her, saw the flush still on her cheeks, a slight trembling in her hand. I wanted to shout, wanted to break something, but the words lodged in my throat. Instead, I said, "Fine." Then I went upstairs without another word. She never came after me. That night, I lay awake and realized I had to do more than just confirm the affair. I had to figure out my next move. And I had one advantage. She'd given me legal power of attorney over her business finances a year earlier, for tax reasons. She hated dealing with forms, and let me handle the official paperwork, so I started planning. I didn't want to just humiliate her. I wanted her to understand that every lie she'd told, every betrayal, would have consequences. For the next few days, I acted normal. I kissed her cheek in the mornings, I helped my son with his breakfast. I went to work. Inside, I was methodical. I spoke to my old friend who happened to be an attorney. He laid out the steps. "You're sure you want to do this?" he asked me at one point. "She'll freak out." "I'm sure," I said, my voice cold. I'm done being her safety net. 2 days later, I quietly transferred the money from her business accounts into a new account under my sole control. She was so distracted, so caught up in her meetings, she never checked. I waited, listening for the meltdown that must come. But it didn't. Not yet. One morning, I served her with a notice that effectively locked her out of the business, pending an internal audit. She was still clueless, but I could see her brows knit when she tried to log into the account on her laptop. She frowned, typed something in, tried again, glanced at me. "Hey, do you know why I can't?" I shrugged. "I'll check later," I said, turning away. That same afternoon, I had all the corporate documents, her articles of incorporation, her partnership agreements, everything. transferred to a new office I was renting on the other side of town. The legal ownership was in a complicated trust structure that effectively gave me the controlling interest. She'd signed the forms months ago, thinking it was routine. That night, she confronted me, eyes flashing with alarm. "Why can't I access my own accounts?" I played innocent. "We need to talk to our lawyer. Maybe it's some glitch. You remember we updated the paperwork?" Her face paled. "But that shouldn't lock me out." I shrugged again. She stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. I didn't offer any explanation. Then I went to put our son to bed. She followed me up the stairs, but I closed his bedroom door behind me, effectively shutting her out as I read him a bedtime story. For the first time, I felt a quiet sense of control. She tried to call me on my cell later that night, even though we were in the same house. I let it ring. I set it aside and listened to her voice break on the voicemail. She sobbed, demanded to know what I was doing. I pressed delete, heart steady. Because at that point, I wasn't punishing her to be cruel. I was cutting myself free. The next day, she tried to corner me in the kitchen. "John, what the hell is going on? Where's my money? My documents? Why won't you answer my calls?" I looked her dead in the eyes. My voice was calm, but inside, I could feel the rage waiting like a coiled snake. "I'm done saving you from your own choices. You lied to me. Repeatedly. Betrayed everything we built. So now, the firm is mine. Or rather, it's in a trust under my direction." Her face went white, then red. She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. Then she spat. "Is this some kind of sick revenge?" "Call it what you want," I said. "I'm just done playing the fool." She tried to speak, but I turned my back on her. A wave of satisfaction pulsed through me. I was still furious, but it felt good to have the upper hand, to see her realize she wasn't untouchable. Days passed in an insane blur of phone calls, screaming matches, and tears on her end. I stayed mostly silent, responding only when necessary. She yelled that she'd call the police, that she'd get the best lawyer in town, that she'd ruin me. But my friend had ensured everything was tidy and legal. Her frantic attempts to fight back were like a bird fluttering against a closed window. Late one evening, I was standing in the hallway near the front door, about to leave for a meeting with a new client. She blocked my path. Her mascara was smudged from crying. "Why?" she choked out. "Why are you doing this to me?" I exhaled slowly, meeting her gaze. "Because you lied to me. You broke what we had. I stayed up nights, worrying how to fix us, to save us, while you were sneaking around. I gave you everything I could, and you spat in my face." She pressed the heels of her palms to her eyes. "I made a mistake. I'm sorry, all right. I was bored. I was lonely. I felt my anger flare." "You were bored. That's your excuse." "It's not an excuse," she said, voice rising. "I needed to feel something. I needed excitement. Our marriage was so predictable." I closed my eyes, the words hitting me like a hammer. Predictable. The stable life I built for us was predictable. What about our son? I demanded, my voice raw. "Did you even think about him?" She collapsed against the wall, sobbing into her hands. I watched her, wanting to feel pity, but mostly I felt empty. Then I left without another word. Behind me, she screamed my name, her voice echoing in the quiet hallway. My attorney friend asked me if I was sure I didn't want to proceed with the divorce right away. I told him, in time. For now, I just want to focus on my new project, because something in me had changed. I didn't want to drag this through the courts in some messy spectacle, not yet. I wanted peace in my own mind first, and I found it by channeling all that anger into building something new. I rented an office downtown, where I began working on a startup idea I had shelved for years. My job at the tech company was stable, but I had a vision of creating my own consulting firm, building software solutions for mid-sized businesses. I poured my time, my energy, every ounce of will into it. And for the first time in a long while, I felt alive. My son was my anchor. I gave him a new room, put an aquarium in there, bought him some colorful fish. The look on his face when he saw them for the first time was priceless. He squealed with excitement, pressing his nose to the glass. It reminded me that life goes on, that there's more to living than the pain of betrayal. Laura tried everything to talk to me after that. Calls, texts, showing up at my office unannounced. I avoided her. Part of me didn't even want to see her face, because I knew if I did, I might erupt again. Or worse, I might crumble. Because a man is not supposed to cry. But the pain's still there, coiling in your gut like a nest of snakes. One day, she cornered me outside the house when I was getting the mail. She was trembling, tears in her eyes. She tried to talk calmly. I know I messed up. I messed up so bad. But can you give me a chance to fix it? We can go to therapy, or... Stop, I said, voice low. You didn't just cheat. You lied to my face for weeks, maybe months. You brought that man into our house. You let our son see things he shouldn't have. Don't you dare stand there and ask me for a second chance. She started sobbing again, hugging herself, looking desperate and small. And it struck me that, once upon a time, I might have been the man to comfort her, to wrap her in my arms, to say, "It's okay, we'll figure it out." But that man was gone. "I'm sorry," she kept mumbling. "I'm so sorry." "Then be sorry," I answered. "But don't ask me to pretend it didn't happen. I've got a life to build. Without you." She looked shattered, but I turned and walked inside, letting the door close in her face. I heard her sobbing on the porch for a while. Eventually, she left. In the meantime, I got a call from one of her old business partners, a woman who used to be a friend of ours. She pleaded with me to release some of the brand's accounts so they could fulfill orders. I told her I'd consider it if they parted ways with Laura. She balked, called me names, then threatened to sue. But there was nothing she could do, legally speaking. So a few days later, I got a polite email from that same business partner, offering me a chance to buy her out. I accepted. Another piece of control fell into my hands. I wasn't proud of how much satisfaction I took in it all, but it fueled me. Like a man who's been on the edge of a cliff too long, I needed to see I could stand on solid ground again. One evening, I was at my new office building, rummaging through paperwork, when the front door opened. In walked the man himself, Laura's so-called masseur. I recognized him instantly from that day at the private gym. Tall, broad-shouldered, that self-assured grin plastered on his face. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The tension felt like a coiled spring. He cleared his throat. "I'm Alex," he said, as though I didn't already know. "I came to, talk." I held his gaze. My jaw tightened. I'd fantasized about beating him to a pulp more times than I cared to admit, but I was so far past the point of physically lashing out. It wasn't worth it. "What do you want?" I asked, voice clipped. He rubbed the back of his neck, looking almost sheepish. "Look, man, I didn't know it would get this complicated. She told me you were drifting apart, that you were basically separated." "Shut up," I snapped, stepping forward so quickly he flinched. He took a step back. "You have no idea what she told me. But let's get this straight. I'm not your man. You're just a random asshole who decided to get involved with another man's wife." He nodded, swallowing hard. "I'm sorry." No, I interrupted. "You're not sorry. You just don't like that things got messy. Now get the hell out of my office before I call security." He stared at me for a moment, then turned on his heel and left. I stood there, shaking with rage, but also with a perverse sense of relief. Because in that brief encounter, I saw the man for what he was. A selfish opportunist who thrived on short-lived conquests. My anger at him suddenly felt hollow. He hadn't forced her. She'd chosen him. That was the real knife in my gut. In the weeks that followed, I set the wheels in motion to finalize the takeover of Laura's business. She kept calling, leaving tearful messages. I answered none. My attorney said it was the best approach, legally speaking. And in truth, I just didn't want to hear her voice. My son asked me a few times, "Where's Mommy?" or "Why is Mommy crying?" I did my best to reassure him without lying outright. "She's handling grown-up problems," I'd say. I felt guilty about the tension in the house. But the alternative was letting her back into my life, letting her whitewash everything. I couldn't do that. One afternoon, I picked up little Jay from daycare, and he asked if we could stop by the pet store. He wanted more fish for his aquarium. We ended up choosing 2 bright neon tetras and a shy catfish that stuck to the glass. Watching him examine them, eyes wide with delight, gave me a sense of calm I hadn't felt in months. In that moment, I remembered what mattered. My boy. My future. Something that was mine alone. That night, as I tucked him into bed, he looked up at me and asked, "Dad, are you sad?" I paused. "A little," I admitted, "but it's okay to be sad sometimes." He nodded, then hugged me tight. "I love you, Dad." My chest tightened painfully, but I forced a smile. "I love you too, buddy." When I left his room, I felt a surge of determination. I wouldn't let Laura's betrayal define me. I had to show my son that a man doesn't crumble under pain. He finds a way to carry on, even if the burden feels like it's going to crush him. I suppose that was the turning point for me. I decided to push the divorce forward, asked my attorney to draft the papers. Laura found out and tried to contact me. I ignored her. Finally, one morning, she managed to catch me in the driveway as I was heading to my car. She stood there, hair unkempt, wearing wrinkled clothes, her eyes puffy from crying or lack of sleep. "John," she said, voice shaking, "please, talk to me." I sighed, unlocked my car door, but didn't get in yet. The old me might have softened at her state. Clearly she wasn't coping well. But that door closed the day I saw her in our bedroom with him. "What do you want me to say?" I asked quietly, though my tone was cold. She stepped closer, tears brimming. "I know I can't fix what I did, but can we at least talk? We have a child. You can't just erase me." I looked down at my hands, remembering how they trembled that night at the women's club, how the leftover petals in the dumpster seemed like a funeral for our marriage. Then I lifted my gaze. "You made your choice," I said. "You thought you needed more excitement, more risk. Well, you got it." She covered her face with her hands, sobbing. "I messed up. I didn't. I never thought you'd do this. I thought you'd yell, or hate me, or forgive you." My voice was almost a snarl. "You think I just turned the other cheek like a whipped dog?" She shook her head, tears spilling over. "No. I thought maybe we could find a way." I realize now how stupid that sounds. I stood there for a moment, wanting to tell her how deeply she'd cut me, how worthless she'd made me feel. But I knew those words wouldn't help me. They'd only feed her desperation, maybe twist her into another manipulative attempt to salvage something. So I just said, "I'll let you know when I have something to say. For now, my lawyer will be in touch." She let out a raw, broken sob and turned away. I got into the car and drove off. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, and my throat burned from swallowing my emotions. But I kept driving. I was done. When the final papers were served a week later, she called me repeatedly, crying and begging. I blocked her number. She sent me emails in the middle of the night, long, rambling, confessional. I skimmed a few lines, then clicked away. It wasn't that I didn't care she was hurting. It was that I needed to protect my own sanity now. Eventually, I completed the takeover. Her little firm became my property. I had no interest in running it for the long term, but I wanted to ensure she couldn't use it as leverage or a meal ticket while continuing to hide behind me. It felt both satisfying and hollow, like punishing a ghost. At night, though, I started sleeping better. I realized I no longer jerked awake with the memory of that day, seeing them together. I was making progress on my new consulting firm, taking new clients, forging new partnerships. My son's laughter filled our home again. Yes, our home. Hers in name, maybe, but not in spirit anymore. The final confrontation came in the form of an email from her, a last, desperate confession. She wrote that she'd cut things off with Alex, that she realized she'd let a moment of excitement destroy what we had. She pleaded for a second chance, offered to sign over any part of her old business if I would just talk to her. She ended with, "I miss you. I love you." I sat there reading it, feeling that old pang of heartbreak stirring in my chest, but it was muted. Like a bruise that's mostly healed, all I could think was, if you loved me, you would have come to me before you let another man into our bed, before you turned our marriage into a farce. And so I closed the email. Didn't reply. Because sometimes silence is the only answer you have left to give. In the weeks that followed, she tried to see our son. I let her have limited visitation under the informal arrangement we hashed out. I owed him that stability, at least. But I kept it short, supervised. I couldn't let him be used as a bargaining chip. She cried when I handed him over in a neutral location, usually a park or a child-friendly restaurant. I'd watch from a distance while she tried to gather him in her arms, forcing a smile through her tears. Then I'd take him home afterward, and we'd settle back into our routine. During one of those pickups, she whispered to me, "I know I can't fix this, but I'm not giving up on you, or on us." I met her gaze, feeling the cold finality within me. "Laura, you already did." She closed her eyes, tears leaking. I got our son situated in the car and drove away. Some part of me felt pity for her, enough that I considered how thin the line is between love and hate, how quickly trust can evaporate. But I reminded myself that she'd had that choice all along, and she chose betrayal. A few days later, my attorney sent me a text. "Everything is done. She's out of the business. The trust is yours. The divorce is in the final stage." I read it, exhaled a long breath. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a weight lift off my chest. That night, I tucked little Jay into bed, kissed his forehead. Then I stood in the darkness of my own bedroom, the sheets fresh and clean. The house was quiet. There was no storm of anxiety swirling in my head, no panic about who might be creeping in while I was away. I slid under the covers, stared at the ceiling for a long moment. I remembered the flowers I'd left rotting in that dumpster, the slow, humiliating wait in the parking lot, the scalding anger that almost drove me insane. And yet I'd emerged alive. I wasn't the man I used to be. Maybe I was harsher, less naive, but I was free of her lies. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in a long time, I slept. No prayer in my head, no knot in my stomach, no voice whispering I was a fool. Just a long, deep exhale, and a sense of quiet emptiness that, strangely enough, felt like peace.